Welcome to the law offices of Chris M. Ingram's Immigration News Show. Today we ask, is immigration the engine or the emergency brake on American innovation? We would like to thank attorney Chris M. Ingram and staff at the law offices of Chris M. Ingram for their hard work in preparing the research for this show, which draws on a wide variety of news sources from both sides of the aisle, providing balanced view. Attorney Ingram is also a vocal advocate for the rights and protection of immigration applicants, although our coverage is designed to be nonpartisan. Please don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to our channel. We're also on Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, X, Reddit, and Instagram, where we're growing rapidly thanks to our social media team. You can also visit our website on www.breakthroughusa.com. We'd love to see you there. Okay, let's dive in. Our mission today is, well, it's a deep dive really into this dynamic ecosystem where human capital meets technological progress. And this discussion, it's specifically tailored for you, the STEM professional, the kind of person who lives and breathes data, precision, systems thinking. We're trying to move beyond all the political rhetoric that surrounds immigration, and look strictly at the data our legal team has pulled together. Our core question, I guess, is one of engineering. Is the input of immigrant talent the high-octane fuel that's accelerating American ingenuity, or are procedural friction and policy volatility acting like an overwhelming drag force?
Yeah.
Basically applying the emergency brake to critical fields like AI and biotech.
It's such an essential framing. I mean, we aren't discussing migration purely as a social issue here. It's fundamentally economic and structural.
Right.
If the data confirms, as our researchers suggest it does, that immigrant talent is disproportionately responsible for innovation, then any policy instability, any uncertainty, it translates directly into economic risk and, frankly, a loss of global competitiveness.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We really need to analyze this system the way you, as an engineer or scientist, would analyze a complex network architecture. You'd be looking for bottlenecks, right? High latency, single points of failure.
Okay, so let's start with the hard evidence presented in the legal research. The core argument here is pretty bold. Immigration isn't just a policy footnote. It's the fundamental operating system of American innovation.
It sounds like a big claim, but...
It does. But when we look at the numbers our team found, that statement becomes, well, pretty difficult to refute.
That's absolutely right. Our researchers went deep into corporate founding data, and the results are, frankly, staggering. If you considered the U.S. unicorn companies, those enterprises valued over $1 billion.
Yeah, the big one.
Immigrants and their children founded a remarkable 55% of them.
55%? Wow.
Yeah, think about that for a second. More than half of America's fastest-growing, most disruptive economic engines were ignited by someone who chose to come here, or whose parents made that choice. This isn't just like accidental success.
Wow.
This points to a structural reliance on global talent. It's baked into the system.
And this foundational role, it isn't just limited to Silicon Valley startups, is it? Our team found it's deeply embedded in the most sensitive areas of research and development. What did the research show regarding patents?
The patents, yeah. The data shows that foreign-born inventors file 35% of all U.S. patents.
35%. That's huge.
It is. And when we break down those patents, we see they aren't just concentrated in, peripheral industries. They are overwhelmingly focused on critical, high-leverage sectors. Cutting-edge semiconductor design, advanced artificial intelligence algorithms, complex biotechnology.
So the exact fields where global leadership is absolutely paramount.
Precisely. These are the industries defining the future economy.
So it follows then that when we walk into any major research institution or cutting-edge corporation, we should expect to see this kind of representation.
Absolutely. The research confirms it. 1 in 4 STEM workers in the U.S. was born elsewhere.
1 in 4.
That ratio basically defines the operational capacity of the American scientific machine. So for our listeners, if you're in the lab or a corporate setting, this means that diverse engineering team that built the algorithms optimizing your logistics, or the research team that engineered the vaccine you recently took, or maybe the physicists launching the satellites mapping global climate patterns. All of these efforts rely heavily on this segment of the workforce. They are, fundamentally, the essential human capital input.
Connecting that abstract data to the listener's daily reality is so critical here. I mean, if 25% of the STEM workforce are foreign-born, disrupting that flow, it's functionally equivalent to shutting down 1/4 of the nation's advanced R&D capacity.
It really is. And that brings us directly to the structural challenge, which attorney Chris Ingram's team frames, I think, quite rightly, as a problem of engineering, not philosophy.
Okay.
If this talent is the engine, the system designed to process and retain it is, well, severely underperforming. We're facing backlogs that have swollen past 3.1 million cases across various visa categories.
3.1 million.
Yeah. That is completely unacceptable system latency.
How does that latency, that delay, translate into a measurable cost for the companies relying on that talent?
Right.
Because there must be a cost.
Oh, absolutely. In engineering terms, high latency equals instability and unpredictable performance. Simple as that. So for a company waiting on, say, an R&D chemist's visa extension, a 12-month backlog means a 12-month delay on a crucial project timeline.
Right.
Certainty, predictability, that's innovation capital. And the current system provides basically none. So that seems to be the only logical approach, especially for a STEM-focused economy like ours. We absolutely must align policy with the exponential demands of fields like quantum computing and clean energy. These fields require stability and speed to thrive.
And the current instability.
It just serves as a massive dampener on that potential exponential growth. It's like running with the brakes on.
Okay, this moves us pretty seamlessly from the abstract data on patents and unicorns to the human stories that, well, they illustrate the true potential of this talent, don't they?
They really do.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The journey of Katya Ikezarreta, the first Mexican-born woman in space. Our team detailed her story meticulously.
Katya's story is it's a profound demonstration of resilience meeting opportunity. It really is. She arrived in Los Angeles at age 7. Her family had actually left stable professional jobs in Mexico looking for a new path.
Wow.
And she recalls knowing only 3 words of English.
Hello, please, and thank you.
Just 3 words. Yeah, and that lack of language immediately put her behind the curve in the American educational system.
And she faced some significant initial skepticism.
Right.
And obstacles from the system itself.
Oh, definitely. The research our team found noted a first-grade teacher actually suggested she repeat the grade because of her English struggles.
Oh, no.
But that challenge, it seems, just galvanized her. She realized the library was the key, the gateway to mastering English. And she also turned to math and science, seeing them as universal languages where her abilities could speak louder than her vocabulary at the time.
That's smart.
By middle school, she wasn't just doing well, she was deeply curious. She famously built a functioning flashlight in the 7th grade, kind of a physical symbol of illumination in her own life, you could say.
That's incredible. And her story is particularly powerful because it highlights this ambition that's fueled by working class necessity, right? Not inherited wealth or privilege.
That's such a critical component, and it's often overlooked. While she was attending high school, she worked the closing shift, 4 to 10 p.m., at McDonald's.
While in high school.
Yeah. And she wasn't saving for a car or, typical teenage things. She was working to help pay for her sister's asthma medication and her own college textbooks.
Wow.
She studied calculus in the break room. Our researchers noted she often had food stains on the pages.
That paints a picture.
It does. And when college counselors told her UCLA was a distant reach, maybe too ambitious, she applied anyway. She wrote this powerful application essay about finishing her physics homework by the glow of that very flashlight she built years earlier, because sometimes the family's electricity was shut off.
That takes incredible determination. And that drive clearly continued through college and into her career. That transition to the professional world must have been intense.
Relentless is probably the word. At UCLA, she apparently maintained 4 part-time jobs simultaneously. 4. And critically, after one professor kind of dismissed her interest in propulsion as unrealistic, she didn't accept that discouragement. She just cold emailed nearly every NASA-affiliated researcher she could find until she finally secured an internship at JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
Just pure persistence. Wow.
Total persistence. And she moved quickly from intern to engineer there, working on hardware that eventually left Earth.
She became part of the backbone of the Perseverance rover mission, didn't she?
She did. She was soldering actual flight hardware, ensuring the integrity of the mechanical systems. And she watched the landing in 2021 from the control room, knowing the very parachute fabric and components she'd helped test were now safely on Mars.
That must have been an unbelievable moment.
Can you imagine? It's such a powerful connection between her working class ambition and, well, literally reaching for the stars.
And that success then set the stage for her ultimate breakthrough, the 11-minute flight that took her out of this world.
Right. In 2021, she was selected by Space for Humanity for Blue Origin's NS-21 mission. And on June 4th, 2022, at just 26 years old, she made history.
Incredible.
She described the 11-minute trip as providing this profound realization, looking back at Earth, seeing a planet without any visible borders.
Rome, 20,000 spectators, one epic battle, two warriors, one destiny. But before they can fight for glory, they must face the real challenge, getting their visa approved.
If you want to enter, show me your visa.
They should have went to the law offices of Chris M. Ingram. They are very good.
Yes, I've heard the same. They handled my visa in no time.
Off to the Lions pit.
Come with me, boys. It's dinner time.
Because even legends need the offices of Chris M. Ingram.
Are you looking for a visa? Why don't you get your free consultation on the Breakthrough website? We're with you every step of the way.
She said she had a moment of pure understanding about interconnectedness. She realized her journey had kind of transcended geography itself.
But the research our team gathered shows her impact compounded back here on Earth. She didn't just achieve her dream, she actually started building infrastructure for others to follow.
That's right. Her personal infrastructure, you could say, became community infrastructure. Since 2023, she founded the Katia Ecazarreta Foundation. It's actively mentoring over 3,000 Latina girls in STEM, focusing on hands-on rocketry and coding workshops.
3,000 girls already.
And Dr. Anita Sengupta, who was her mentor at JPL herself, the daughter of immigrants, by the way, noted that Katia's trajectory illustrates a fundamental truth. Diversity isn't a checkbox, it's rocket fuel for innovation.
That's a great quote. Chris Ingram's analysis of her trajectory views it as a testament to that unyielding spirit that defines the American dream. Her story is like a high-resolution blueprint for what happens when we enable that spirit through a stable, supportive system.
It's more than just inspirational, though. It's quantifiable. Her foundation has already raised over $2 million in scholarships. Her presence in the media, in schools, it ensures that the next breakthrough in your lab, listener, the next critical patent, might come from a student who is inspired by her journey. Someone who realized that persistence, even when you're studying calculus in a McDonald's break room, can literally lead to the stars. This is the engine working at full capacity.
Okay, so now we need to pivot. We have to look at the friction points. We move from the inspiration of the engine, like Katia's story, to the reality check of policy volatility. This is what our legal team identifies as the emergency brake on those talent pipelines.
Yeah, this is where the system starts to grind.
This is where instability directly undermines the R&D timelines and the certainty that STEM professionals absolutely demand.
Exactly. The policy shifts detailed in the legal research show a really profound lack of stability, particularly around October 2025. That month seems to have been defined by an unprecedented surge in IC operations.
The surge.
Yeah. The research shows agents were actually reassigned from critical law enforcement duties, specifically fentanyl interdiction, which is obviously vital,
Right.
to conduct neighborhood sweeps. And the objective, it appeared, was maximizing the quantity of detentions over, say, targeting actual criminality. This fostered widespread fear in communities, the very communities that feed the labor and talent pools we rely on.
And these actions had tangible, pretty terrifying results, even in places designated as sanctuary cities.
Oh, absolutely. Take the detention operation in Chicago's South Shore neighborhood on October 15th. 42 people were detained. But the critical detail, the one that highlights the overreach, is the case of a U.S. citizen named Roderick Johnson.
U.S. citizen.
Yes. He was zip-tied outside his own apartment for 4 hours while agents searched for a completely different person. This isn't just a failure of targeting. It's the creation of an environment where everyone, regardless of their actual status, fears interaction with law enforcement. And that causes people to pull back from community life, from work.
That's chilling. And the research also points to a revival of separation tactics that deeply undermine family stability.
Yeah, that's another deeply concerning finding from our team. Since January, over 2,100 children, including 47 infants, have apparently been separated during interior enforcement actions.
47 infants.
It effectively revives tactics that were widely condemned back in 2018. Now, while the administration might defend this as necessary enforcement, our attorneys report that the vast majority, 68% of those detained, have no criminal record beyond civil immigration violations.
So mostly just immigration status issues.
Right. This kind of aggressive interior enforcement chills the movement of necessary workers and professionals. It creates instability.
But the narrative isn't entirely one-sided, is it? In terms of policy tightening, the courtrooms are sometimes providing a critical counterweight, according to the research.
They are sometimes. The legal system can act as a check. For instance, on October 22nd, U.S. District Judge Brian Murphy in Manhattan apparently aggressively questioned Border Patrol Chief Jason Owens about the reported use of tear gas in residential neighborhoods. He demanded specific data on civilian injuries and documented due process violations.
Holding them accountable.
Trying to, yes. And separately, USCIS quietly reopened DACA deferred action for childhood arrivals to first-time applicants outside of Texas on October 10th. And in a surprisingly fast turnaround, they issued 180-day work permits to about 11,000 Dreamers in STEM fields within 72 hours of filing.
72 hours. That's incredibly fast for USCIS.
It is. It shows that when the system chooses to prioritize a specific group, speed is possible. It highlights the inconsistency, perhaps.
That's a positive adjustment for some high-skilled youth, definitely. But the overall context seems to remain one of tightening constraints, especially when you look at humanitarian pathways.
That humanitarian squeeze is stark. The new refugee ceiling for fiscal year 2026, announced in early October, is capped at just 7,500.
Only 7,500.
Yeah. For historical context, this is the lowest ceiling in modern history. It represents a crushing 94% reduction from the previous year's target.
Wow, 94%.
This explicit prioritization of certain groups and pathways over others really reveals the internal policy tension that's driving the instability we're seeing.
Let's talk about the looming Supreme Court cases. Our legal team flagged these because they represent potential tectonic shifts for the stability of the entire immigration legal framework. And that directly affects our listeners' career planning.
Absolutely. Two cases in particular require immediate attention from anyone in this space. First, there's matter of Negussi, which is scheduled for November 12th. This case will determine if individuals who were coerced into persecutory acts, think of a child soldier, for instance, are permanently barred from asylum relief.
That sounds like a difficult ethical question.
It is, and it potentially impacts over 50,000 asylum claims currently in the system, creating massive uncertainty for some very vulnerable populations already within the U.S.
Okay, but the truly systemic risk, especially for the STEM audience, comes from the December case, Loper Bright Enterprises v. Raimondo. This deals with something called Chevron deference. Now, that sounds really academic. Why should a software engineer in San Jose care about the specific administrative law doctrine?
It sounds dry, I know, but Chevron deference is incredibly important. It refers to the long-standing principle that when a law is ambiguous, courts should generally defer to the reasonable interpretations made by the agency responsible for enforcing it, like USCIS or the Department of Labor.
Okay, so the agency gets to interpret the gray areas.
Basically, yes. If the Supreme Court rolls back or eliminates Chevron deference, it means that every major administrative interpretation underpinning our work visa system could become instantly vulnerable.
Every interpretation?
Potentially. The definition of a specialty occupation for the H-1B visa, the scope of OPT regulations for students, a criteria for L-1 intercompany transfer visas, all of these could be challenged in federal courts across the country.
So without Chevron, the rules of the game for work authorization could be constantly shifting based on the outcome of individual lawsuits in different places.
Exactly. It removes the stability that agencies, employers, and employees rely on. It could unleash a flood of judicial reinterpretation that might change H-1B requirements or EAD eligibility literally overnight. That's instability engineered by the judiciary itself, completely destabilizing corporate HR compliance and planning.
That sounds chaotic. And compounding that risk is a looming Ninth Circuit ruling on the H-1B cap itself.
Yes, our legal team is watching this one very closely. A ruling is expected possibly by year-end. It could potentially cap the number of specialty occupation visas at 65,000 annually, down from the current 85,000 plus various exemptions.
That's a big drop.
It's a significant reduction. And if that happens, it's not just a numerical cut. It's likely a direct trigger for a rapid talent exodus. Companies will accelerate their plans to shift R&D operations, maybe open offices in Canada, Ireland, or other countries that offer greater visa certainty.
And the research our team compiled connects this volatility directly to operational failures and labs and companies across the country, showing the real, tangible cost.
These are absolutely not abstract losses. Our researchers found a case in Aurora, Colorado. A Guatemalan robotics PhD candidate at CU Boulder was detained on October 9th. His employer, a defense contractor, immediately lost a $2.3 million DARPA grant deadline.
Why?
Because the candidate's necessary biometric data and security clearances were inaccessible while he was in detention. The cost of that detention is directly quantifiable, R&D capital lost, $2.3 million. Gone.
Wow. And we saw a similar disastrous impact on high-level scientific research documented in Boston, too.
Yes, the case of the Brazilian postdoctoral researcher in CRISPR gene editing is just tragic, really. She was NIH-funded, working on critical biological science, but she self-deported because her ed renewal, her work permit, was delayed 11 weeks.
Just 11 weeks.
The uncertainty was just too great for her. She packed up her entire NIH-funded project and took it directly to Switzerland, which apparently offered her immediate certainty and status.
So that's a measurable loss of proprietary U.S. scientific advancement.
Gone, due purely to bureaucratic latency, a preventable loss.
Attorney Chris Ingram notes that these policy actions tear at the fabric of families and communities, and he emphasizes the need for dignity, ensuring no one is just reduced to a statistic in this process.
His perspective really underscores that efficiency and dignity are, or at least should be, inseparable in this system. When policy variables lead to raids, court uncertainty, massive processing caps, they're directly altering the hiring pipelines and research timelines of every single listener in the STEM field.
So why did you choose the law offices of Chris M. Ingram as your attorney?
Honestly, they made it feel like I was never on my own.
Every time I had a question, someone actually answered. They cared.
We never felt alone. The videos felt like we had someone with us the whole way. Every form, every question, they had a video that explained it.
It made the process so easy.
Our tutorials are designed to get you over the finishing line, and after watching them, you are reassured that you have completed that section correctly.
At the law offices of Chris M. Ingram, our mission is to support you. Our instructional videos will guide you every step of the way. So join us.
For you, the listener, the system is currently engineered for friction. That's the reality.
Okay, let's shift the focus now to the really granular daily reality of the system. What does this friction actually look like on the ground? The USCIS policy pivots our legal team has detailed seem like structural overhauls that demand immediate workflow recalibration from every HR department, every law firm.
Oh, absolutely. The past 60 days alone have been defined by immense procedural instability. The mandatory electronic payments rule, which became effective October 28th, is a perfect example.
Right, the pay.gov requirement.
Yes. All paper-filed benefit requests now must use pay.gov. The goal, on paper, is excellent. Cut 21 days off latency by eliminating mailroom processing delays. Sounds good.
But the execution has created immediate measurable chaos, hasn't it?
That's the friction point right there. The research reports a 40% spike in rejected filings just in the first week.
40%. Why?
Often simple payment errors. International credit cards frequently flag the government payment as potential fraud, or just simple digital entry errors happen, human error. So now attorneys are telling us they're required to pre-audit every payment screenshot and verify transaction IDs before they even submit the application.
So that adds significant time and legal costs.
Yes, it effectively nullifies the intended efficiency gain. More work, more cost, same or worse results sometimes.
Then we have the perhaps heavier blow related to employment authorization documents, the EADs. The sunset of the automatic 540-day extension sounds like a huge deal.
It's a massive step backward for stability. It became effective October 30th for new renewals. That 540-day safety net, which gave applicants like H-4 spouses or adjustment of status applicants some guaranteed continuity while they waited for renewal, it's gone.
Just gone.
It's just gone. Now, they are immediately subject to fresh biometrics, new background checks, guaranteeing a 6-12-month wait for renewed authorization. DHS rationalized this by saying it restores robust alien screening and vetting, but the operational consequence is guaranteed workforce disruption, people falling out of status, losing jobs.
Let's return to that Bay Area biotech firm case study our researchers found. It really illustrates the real-world impact of this specific policy change on a critical industry.
That crystallographer's case is just a masterclass in regulatory risk. She was an H-4 EAD holder, the lead scientist on a crucial molecular biology trial. When When her authorization lapsed mid-trial because of the renewal delay, no more safety net, the firm was legally forced to pull her off the project.
Mid-trial.
Mid-trial. Because her specific data and work were essential, this created a compliance nightmare. It actually violated the protocol for their pending FDA submission.
Oh, wow.
The result, a 73-day delay in that crucial FDA submission and an estimated $1.8 million in deferred revenue for the company.
All from one EAD renewal delay.
All from one policy change, intended as a procedural tweak. It translated directly into a significant financial and regulatory setback.
So this basically forces employers to internalize the costs of governmental inefficiency. They essentially have to buy back certainty through things like premium processing.
Precisely. Employers are now forced to budget, $2,805 per employee just for the I-765 premium processing fee, simply to avoid these potentially catastrophic project failures. The government is effectively externalizing the cost of its own latency onto the high-skilled sector.
We also have a significant and maybe quieter overhaul happening with the naturalization process.
Yeah, the new civics test. It was piloted in October and has been made substantially more difficult. It now draws from 128 questions, up from 100 before, and the passing threshold has been raised from 60% correct to 70% correct.
So harder questions and a higher bar to pass.
Exactly. And the early failure rates observed by our researchers, particularly at the LA field office, show a spike to 28% on first attempts. That's compared to about 12% previously.
Okay, but why does a more difficult civics test impact the careers of highly skilled professionals who are often already in the system, maybe on work visas?
Because it acts as yet another arguably unnecessary barrier to achieving permanent stability, getting that green card or citizenship. Consider the case study our legal team provided, a computational physicist from Iran. Brilliant guy, presumably. He struggled with the new, perhaps more culturally specific civics bar.
Okay.
Because his own path to naturalization stalled due to failing the test, his U.S. citizen spouse must now sponsor him for an EB-2 green card petition, essentially from scratch.
Starting all over again.
Pretty much. This procedural detour adds maybe 36 months of agonizing uncertainty, plus around $15,000 in additional legal fees. It just shows how these seemingly minor procedural friction points can accumulate and actually derail highly successful careers.
Moving to fees, the research detailed a massive new H-1B consular filing fee that seems to have generated shockwaves, especially in the tech sector.
Oh yeah, the $100,000 H-1B consular filing fee, effective September 21st. It's applied to first-time H-1B petitions processed abroad, so when a company hires someone directly from overseas.
$100,000 per person.
Per petition, yes. Now, universities are largely exempt, but this absolutely hammers tech startups, which often rely heavily on international recruitment to find niche talent.
I bet.
The National Foundation for American Policy, NFAP, estimates this will lead to a 22% drop in H-1B approvals for computer-related occupations. And it disproportionately hits AI and semiconductor firms hardest. It's essentially a prohibitive tariff on acquiring specific talent.
And that just accelerates the talent flight we talked about earlier.
Immediately.
However, there is maybe a sliver of good news related to foreign direct investment through the EB-5 program.
Yes. Amidst all this tightening, there's a strategic reduction proposed here. The proposed fee schedule, published October 23rd, actually slashes the I-526E petition fee, that's the main EB-5 investor petition, from $11,160 down to $9,625.
Okay, a reduction.
If that's enacted, this policy shift is expected by some analysts to potentially unlock something like $12–15 billion in foreign direct investment. And it's often targeted specifically at STEM infrastructure projects, new quantum computing hubs, battery gigafactories, things like that.
So that shows that targeted fee reductions can actually serve as an economic multiplier. It's not always about raising fees.
Precisely. It shows policy can be used strategically to incentivize investment.
The overall cost, though, of this systemic inefficiency seems clear. Our team tracked a specific example, a Stanford postdoc in material science, highly skilled individual.
Right. And this postdoc accepted a tenure-track faculty offer in Singapore rather than risk the uncertainty of a 14-month I-140 green card petition backlog and the looming EAD gap caused by the sunsetting extension.
So they just left.
They left. The decision-making calculus for elite global talent is often quite simple. They prioritize certainty and stability over location, even if they prefer. The U.S. law firms are telling us they're no longer just filing applications, they're creating mandatory visa continuity plans for their corporate clients.
Like disaster recovery plans, but for visas.
Basically, yes. Because the system itself is designed, intentionally or not, to stress test stability right to the breaking point. And attorney Chris Ingram's view on this is that these procedural mazes ensnare the most vulnerable, and they strip away the stability that's absolutely needed for innovation to flourish. His plea is for reform that integrates common sense and, frankly, compassion into the bureaucratic code.
Okay, we need to zoom out now and look at the macro lens, the big picture. The research our team gathered confirms that immigration acts as a sort of invisible hand on the U.S. economy, on the ledger. And it suggests that the combined friction of these enforcement actions and the policy volatility is causing a dangerous economic brownout. Maybe not a full blackout, but growth is being severely suppressed.
The data paints a stark warning picture, yeah. The high cost of this talent loss, the friction, it's forcing significant downward revisions in economic forecasts. The official U.S. GDP growth projection for 2025, for instance, has been cut to 1.3%. That's down from the 1.8% originally forecast just a few months prior.
That 0.5% difference.
Yeah.
That's billions of dollars in lost opportunity, isn't it?
Billions, absolutely. And the long-term projections are even more staggering when you think about the cumulative damage. The NFAP models, which our researchers cited, predict a potential $1.9 trillion loss in cumulative national output by 2035 if these talent constraints aren't addressed.
Explain it with a T.
With a T. Furthermore, they project a corresponding 15.7 million reduction in the total U.S. workforce compared to what it could be. So we're sacrificing both short-term growth and long-term labor capacity simultaneously. It's a double hit.
And this isn't just a white-collar, high-tech problem affecting Silicon Valley. The agricultural sector, the very foundation of our food supply, seems to be collapsing under the weight of some of these policies.
The impact on essential industries is visceral. It's immediate. Take Wisconsin dairy. It relies on immigrant labor for about 70% of its workforce milking, processing.
Wow.
They're facing an estimated $1.2 billion revenue crater.
Billion? Just in Wisconsin dairy?
Just in Wisconsin dairy. Milk prices there have spiked 15% since August, directly correlating, analysts say, with the loss of over 4,000 workers due to targeted ICE swoops in the region.
Wow.
Similarly, down south, Georgia onion growers are projecting a 28% yield drop, and they've quantified the precision loss.
You finally got your family together on a H-1B. Your American dream begins. Your employer files for your EB-2 green card, but the wait is over 11 years. As the years go by, frustration grows, and now the company is talking about layoffs. This could be the end of your American dream. You search for help, but luckily, you land on BreakthroughUSA.com. They listened, reassured you, and built your EB-1 case with precision. Then one day, a notification buzzes, EB-1 approved. With your EB-1 green card, your entire family can breathe.
I have got my visa. I got my visa.
That's why the law offices of Chris M. Ingram is trusted. Your future shouldn't wait. Let's talk EB-1.
What are the next steps?
Need help with your visa? Book your free consultation now at www.breakthroughUSA.com and let us take care of you.
Every single missing worker costs the farm about $1,800 in lost farm gate revenue. It's incredibly direct.
And construction and energy are stalling just at a time when America needs massive infrastructure expansion, right?
Exactly. Construction is a high-latency sector anyway, and this makes it worse. In Florida, where maybe 60% of construction crews are Latino, 18% of projects in the Miami-Dade area have stalled since September, simply because labor cannot be secured reliably.
Just can't find the workers.
We can't find them, or they're afraid to show up. Concrete bids are up 22% as a result. Out in the Permian Basin, the heart of U.S. energy production, a single idling fracking rig costs the operator $110,000 per day. Why? Lack of skilled pipe fitters and welders, many of whom are immigrants. So the friction in the labor market translates directly into inflation and project delays across the entire economy.
So the tech sector, seeing all this uncertainty, is responding by literally moving jobs and capital elsewhere.
That trend is quantifiable and, frankly, alarming. 42% of Series A AI companies surveyed recently by Y Combinator confirmed they have opened Canadian subsidiaries specifically due to chronic visa uncertainty in the U.S.
Hedging their bets.
Exactly. And that $100,000 consular H-1B fee we discussed, our team found data showing it triggered a 31% drop in new H-1B applications from India and China, the very talent pools responsible for something like 76% of all AI patents filed in Silicon Valley last year.
So we are systematically pushing the future of AI to our competitors.
It certainly looks that way. We seem to be actively disincentivizing the very people driving innovation.
And the research also shows how tariffs on trade compound this problem, creating a kind of hidden tax on everyone.
Right. Tariffs on, what, $3 trillion in imports? When paired with these migration curbs, they reduce overall economic growth. It acts like a tax on the entire supply chain. The Tax Foundation quantifies this combined effect, tariffs plus labor shortage, as roughly a $1,300 hidden tax per U.S. household per year.
$1,300.
Eroding real wages, eroding consumer purchasing power. And the supply chain snarls are evident. Canadian tariffs on lumber and steel are reportedly causing a 9% throughput drop at the massive port of Savannah. So this brownout effect is caused by simultaneous friction in both human capital flows and physical goods flows.
But the engine's potential, the potential for exponential return, it remains clear if we could just ease these constraints, right?
That potential is basically the inverse of the loss we're seeing. Facilitating the EB-5 program, for instance, through that proposed fee reduction we mentioned, could unlock that $15 billion in foreign capital for STEM infrastructure. That alone could potentially offset maybe 0.4% of the projected GDP drag.
Okay, so targeted fixes can help.
They can. And more broadly, economic models consistently demonstrate that more inclusive immigration policies could add something like 1.1% to annual U.S. growth through 2040, if that compounds.
That's huge over time.
It compounds to an incredible $28 trillion in additional national wealth. The difference between the current brownout economy and a potentially optimized economy is just staggering.
Attorney Chris Ingram emphasizes that immigrants are the multipliers in our growth story, not just participants.
I think that's exactly the right way to put it. They are the source code, in a way, for the exponential growth factor in innovation. Policies that push them out or make it difficult for them to stay and work, they inevitably erode our shared prosperity. It leads to GDP reductions, increased inflation. We really have to champion their value as a core economic principle if we want to fortify our future competitive edge.
Okay, so what does this all mean for this STEM professional listening right now? We've laid out the problems, the friction. The research our team analyzed shows the system is definitely under stress, but maybe it's not fundamentally broken. Maybe it's debuggable.
That's the key takeaway, I think. It's stressed, but fixable.
So we need to apply the engineering principles that our audience understands, precision, resilience, systems thinking, to stabilize this talent pipeline.
The solution really lies in active management, not just passive hope that things will get better. And our legal team provides some concrete, actionable insights based on their findings. First, at the individual level, right there in your lab, in your office, you are the front line.
What can one person do?
Mentor the next Katya Ekazareda who walked through your door. Use your influence, your internal resources to sponsor OPT extensions for promising students. Critically, run risk simulations within your team or department. The research notes, for example, that a 20% reduction in foreign-born engineers cuts semiconductor yield by 7%. You need to understand your own institution's exposure to this policy instability, quantify it.
And for institutional leaders, the people running labs, HR departments, universities, the playbook requires immediate structural overhaul to mitigate these procedural minefields we've discussed.
They absolutely do. Given the sunset of that EAD safety net, institutions must mandate EAD renewal filing 180 days out, not the old 120 days. They have to budget the, $3,000 per critical hire for premium processing, not as optional, but as a mandatory insurance cost against disruption.
Build it into the budget.
Build it in. And crucially, when you're submitting grant proposals to NIH or DARPA or NSF, build detailed visa continuity plans right into the budget justification and the risk mitigation section. Grant reviewers are starting to demand documented strategies for managing immigration risk because they know it affects project success.
And policy advocacy needs to evolve too, right? It needs to be data-driven, speak the language of equations and outcomes that policymakers might actually understand.
Absolutely. Advocate for rational surgical change, not just broad complaints. For example, lobby Congress to specifically include EB-5 funding set-asides in the CHIPS Act reauthorization, earmark that investment money, to fund the very semiconductor fabrication labs and research facilities that desperately need the specialized immigrant talent.
Connect the dots for them.
Connect the dots. Furthermore, high-level professionals, universities, industry groups need to submit data-driven amicus briefs, friend-of-the-court briefs in these critical legal cases, like the Loper-Bright Chevron challenge. Articulate precisely with numbers how legal instability impacts R&D output, economic certainty, and global competitiveness.
Okay, this brings us to the final, maybe provocative thought for our listeners. Building directly on the high stakes we've covered today. The greatest algorithm we need right now isn't written in Python or C++i. It's written in the courage required to debug the human system itself.
That's a powerful way to put it. We have to look at the highest level consequence. What happens to U.S. global AI leadership? Arguably our most critical competitive advantage right now if, say, 30% of the foreign-born PhDs who are the engine of that innovation depart by 2030 because of instability.
What does the research suggest?
The research our team reviewed warns that China's share of global AI patents could jump from its current 47% to potentially 68% in that scenario. That represents a direct, measurable tipping point in global power dynamics driven by immigration policy.
So, your next breakthrough, listener, whether it's in biology, computing, material science, supply chain logistics, it relies fundamentally on this human operating system remaining intact, remaining frictionless, and remaining welcoming. We need you, the architects and engineers of innovation, to help ensure the compiler is running smoothly, the memory is unfragmented, and the execution is flawless for talent pipelines, too.
Katya Ekizareta looked down from space and saw no borders. We need to look up from our workstations, stop treating these incredibly talented professionals as mere statistics or problems, and apply the same precision and problem-solving rigor we bring to every experiment to the urgent need for policy stability, efficiency, and humane reform in our immigration system.
Thank you so much for being with us today. We hope you gained a lot from this discussion. Please leave us a comment if you can. Additionally, you can support our channel by sharing it with your friends and family, helping us build this community together. Also, follow us on Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, X, and Instagram, where we're growing rapidly thanks to our social media team. We would also like to thank attorney Chris Ingram and his dedicated team once again for researching and preparing this material for our presentation. If you, a friend, or a family member would like a free consultation, you can visit our website at www.breakthroughusa.com and schedule an appointment. We'd love to hear from you and help you if we can. See you next time on Let's Talk U.S. Immigration. Bye for now.